Hi, I'm Kaja.
And I'm Joanna.
And this is Starlit Citadel Reviews.
Caverna, the Cave Farmers, is a worker placement game from Uwe Rosenberg and Mayfair Games.
In Caverna, players control families of dwarves racing to develop their cave and adjacent farmland. It supports 1 to 7 players and lasts half an hour per player.
Players start Caverna by laying out the central boards appropriate to the player count and placing the furnishing tiles on their supply boards. The action cards are shuffled, ordered by stage, and placed face down next to the central board, along with the Harvest Events card. The Harvest markers are placed on the board.
Each player gets a home board, set of tokens in their color, and a pair of reference cards. Players start with 2 dwarves in the dwelling on their board. The remaining tiles and tokens are sorted and placed next to the central board, and a starting player is chosen. Everyone gets food according to their position in the turn order, and the game begins.
Caverna lasts 12 rounds, each of which has 5 phases: adding an action space, replenishing, work, returning home, and harvest. To add an action space, players take the top card of the action card deck and place it face up on the space that corresponds to the current round.
The round's harvest marker is turned over. If it's a green leaf, that means the harvest proceeds as normal. If it's a red question mark, then that token is placed in the topmost open space on the Harvest Events card. The text next to that space tells you how that harvest will proceed.
Next, players replenish the tokens on action spaces marked with the accumulating symbol by adding the amount and type of tokens shown in the semicircle. If the space shows 2 numbers, the first is added if the space is empty, and the second, in parentheses, is added if the space is not empty.
In the work phase, players take turns placing their dwarves on action spaces and taking the listed actions. Each player's dwarves must be placed in ascending order of weapon level, and each action space can only hold 1 dwarf.
Players can clear mountain or forest spaces by taking an action that lets them place one of the large twin tiles. Meadow and field tiles go over forest, and cavern and tunnel tiles go on mountains. If you place a tile on a space showing an animal or resource, you immediately collect it.
You can also use actions to upgrade your tiles. Ore mines are placed on top of 2 adjacent tunnel spaces, while ruby mines go on single tunnels. Meadows can be fenced in to create small or large pastures. Stables can be built on any meadow, forest, or pasture space.
Fields are sown by placing 1 grain or vegetable token from your personal supply on a field and adding the amount of additional tokens shown on the action space from the general supply. Caverns can be furnished with a furnishing tile, each of which has a cost listed on its upper left. Furnished caverns provide bonuses or discounts for actions, let you collect or trade resources, or give bonus points at the end of the game.
If a space lets you collect resources, you take all of the tokens on that space, plus any other resources listed, and place them in your personal supply. If an action space lets you collect animals, you must have a place to store those animals or they will run away.
A pasture holds 2 animals of the same type per space. A stable doubles the capacity of a pasture, or lets you keep 1 animal in a meadow. Many furnishing tiles also store animals. Donkeys can be stored in mines. A single wild boar can be stored on a forest with a stable, and dogs do not require storage. If you place dogs in a meadow or pasture, then it can store a number of sheep equal to 1 more than the number of dogs.
Forging a weapon costs 1 to 8 ore, and a token with a weapon level equal to the number of ore spent is placed on top of the dwarf that's taking the action. Each dwarf can only carry 1 weapon, and weapons cannot be traded.
Weapons are used on expeditions. The expedition's level determines how many pieces of loot you collect, and a dwarf can collect only 1 copy of any loot item, and chooses from loot of a level equal to or lower than their weapon level. After the expedition, their weapon level increases by 1.
The family growth action adds a dwarf to the board. That new dwarf token is placed on top of the dwarf token that is taking the action. You must have a dwelling to accommodate this new dwarf. The start player action space is the only way to change player turn order.
Rubies can be spent at any time in order to purchase goods, place a single tile, or let one dwarf skip the turn order restrictions. After all the dwarves have taken their actions, they return home.
In the harvest phase, players collect one grain or vegetable from each sown field, and they feed their dwarves. Each dwarf requires 2 food, except for newborns, which require 1. Goods may be converted into food at the rates shown on the bottom right of each player board. A player who cannot feed their dwarves gets a begging token.
The harvest ends with breeding. If a player has 2 or more farm animals of the same type, they get 1 additional animal of that type. Dogs do not breed this way, and you have to have room to store all of your new animals.
After 12 rounds, players add up their points from resources, animals, and special tiles, and take point penalties for begging tokens, missing animals, and unused space. The player with the most points is the winner.
So I was really impressed with Caverna. When I heard that there was supposed to be a bigger, improved, more refined version of Agricola, I was really not sure what that meant. And it turns out that what it means is a game that has the same tight resource management as Agricola, that forces you to make the same difficult choices where you're restricted from taking certain actions because people are in your way and you don't have anywhere near enough time to do everything that you need to do, and the winning conditions are really demanding, so you're having trouble meeting them. But it also adds a huge amount of breadth for how you accomplish all those very difficult challenges. To me, Caverna is like a sandbox version of Agricola, where for every problem you have, there are 3 different ways of approaching it, whether it's using an action space, or using one of the furnishing tiles on your board, or going on an expedition to loot the neighboring town. It's got this wonderful sense of playfulness and openness to it, while still challenging you and constraining you into a tight, short, very difficult game. I love it. Another thing that I found really impressive with this particular game is how well it scales. 1 to 7 is an almost unheard of player range, especially for a Eurogame, and I think Caverna really nails the scaling from group to group. The way that they manage the different actions that you can take or that are available to you depending on your group size, all of these little things like skipping over certain rounds or providing different options depending on your player count, really mean that this game scales smoothly, and it feels like it's just as challenging and just as fair and balanced no matter how many people are playing it, which is really nice to see. The one challenge with Caverna, especially if you're playing with a higher player count, is it is extraordinarily prone to analysis paralysis. Like I mentioned, you have a ton of different options for everything that you want to accomplish, which means you're going to spend a lot of time sitting and thinking and weighing those options in your mind. Because this is such a tight optimization game, because there are so many different options available, especially if you're using all of the furnishing tiles, a lot of people are going to take quite some time to figure out their turns, and it means that if you're dealing with a bigger group, you just have to get accustomed to the fact that there's going to be a little bit more downtime.
So another negative to this game that some people might see is the setup time. Now, Agricola was like this anyway, and so when I saw that Caverna was sort of this upgraded version of Agricola, you kind of expect it to happen, and it certainly does. The box is full of stuff. There are so many tiles, it's so heavy, there's cards, there's tokens. It's going to take you a little while to get through the setup the first few times you play. If you're the kind of person that really doesn't like that gets annoyed by having to spend a good long while sorting out all your tiles and pieces and bits and details, then this game might annoy you just a little bit. That being said though, once you get into it, the mechanics play really nicely into this new theme that's been added on to this game, which the game may seem quite familiar to people who play Agricola, but the theme has just broadened it, and the mechanics that have been added play beautifully into the sort of dwarf cave farming theme. This game has gotten cute. Like, it's gotten pretty adorable with the dwarves and the new theme. I didn't really like Agricola all that much. It was a solid game, but not one that I'd choose over another. This one, though, has added that really interesting, really quirky theme to it, and the mechanics play into it really nicely. It's not just pasted onto the old game. There's some nice changes here. Also, component quality, I mean, we all knew it was going to be amazing. Agricola was incredible, and this is no different. Color choice is beautiful. The tokens are wood. You've got really sturdy, beautiful tiles to play with. It's a real joy to look at as well as play. So this is a really nice game and a really beautiful improvement on the old Agricola. So if you like that game, you're going to love this one.
You want to make your game better? Just add fantastical dwarves.